Hey, welcome to the November edition of the How to Podcast series. What are we doing this month? We're doing an episode every single day for the month of November. Yeah, that's a lot of podcast episodes, Dave. And what I want to do is I want to shine a light on amazing podcasters who are doing great things in podcasting. I want you to meet some of my friends. Now, these are friends that I've met through this podcast. These are friends that I've met by being on their show. These are friends that have been at our meetups. These are friends who I cherish and I think are people that you need to know. The best way to grow podcasting is word-of-mouth marketing, telling people about people's shows. That's what this is all about for the month of November. It's all word of mouth. You're going to hear from them come on and talk about their podcast. You're going to hear clips from shows. You'll have links to go follow these amazing people. And I want to give you a variety of different amazing podcasters for you to fall in love with. And you found the right spot. This is November. It's all about the listeners. It's all about you. And I want to shine a light on some amazing people. Are you ready? Okay. Let's jump into this because I think you're going to love this. And I'm glad you're here. And what I can't wait for is the day when you and I get to interact. I can't wait for us to meet each other. Our meetups online through the link in the notes attached to this episode, where you and I can meet each other and I can be there in your corner to support you. I would love to do that. So here's another example of one of my friends at their show, and I want you to fall in love with them just as much as I have. Okay? Welcome to the How to Podcast series. It's November. It's National Podcast Post Month. It's 30 episodes in 30 days, and I want you to meet some of my favorite people in this world called podcasting. It's all about them. It's not about me. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Check out one of my friends. You ready? You ready? Okay, here we go. All right, so Mark Brewer is also another one of our great contributors on our meetups that we do for the How to Podcast series. He's been there many times. What a super gentleman. I love the sound of his voice. He could read me a cereal box. I would listen to it any day. Mark has a very hyper-local podcast, and if you've listened to the show, that's one of the main underserved audiences is hyper-local podcasts. Now imagine you're going to take a trip to New Brunswick. You're driving out to Eastern Canada. You're going to do that whole area of the world. It's beautiful there. And you're going to spend some time in New Brunswick. And you know nothing about New Brunswick. Now, you're in the car, you're driving, and you could listen to a podcast about that beautiful part of the world and know where to go, what places to visit, what you should look for, and get contact information with somebody who lives there, who could guide you through podcasts and through his voice can lead you to great places that you should visit in New Brunswick, Canada. Now, wouldn't that be a great thing to have in the car as you're driving towards that part of the world? Yes. And Mark has a great podcast, New Brunswick Traveler. Again, I love the idea of a local podcast. Think about where you live. In this great big world of ours, there's something special about where you live. Well, it could be just that you live there and you're special. Yeah, you are. But there's something special about where you live. I live near Niagara Falls. I go by the falls all the time, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. But it's a gorgeous place to see. And if you've never had the chance to be here, you would be curious about what it's like here. What's the weather like? And what should I go see? Where should I park? What other things should I see when I'm visiting Niagara Falls? So a local podcast makes sense for anyone who travels or anybody curious about where you live. So think about a local podcast. If you haven't started yet, you don't even know what the podcast is about, think about your location in this world and who you could serve through a local podcast. You might be surprised. You might have a gold mine in front of you and you've never even considered it. Mark leverages New Brunswick, the beauty of this amazing place here in Canada. And like I said, if you're traveling and you're going to that part of the world, this is the perfect podcast for you because you're going to learn more about New Brunswick through Mark than you're ever going to learn anywhere else. So a hyper-local podcast is a great way to reach an audience, serve a community, serve the tourists that come. Maybe you're thinking about moving to New Brunswick. What a perfect podcast to listen to, right? So here's a great example of a hyper-local podcast with my good friend Mark Brewer, and I would love for you to go support him. And if you're traveling to New Brunswick, make sure you listen to every episode and you reach out to Mark and go grab a coffee with him as well on your travels through New Brunswick. Here's Mark Brewer with New Brunswick Traveler, a great hyper-local podcast, a great example for you on how you do podcasting right. I'm learning about blueberries in this episode, and I'm excited because I love blueberries. So Mark, take it away. Talk to us about blueberries in New Brunswick, and you're going to learn a few things at the same time. Here's Mark on the New Brunswick Traveler podcast. Here's Mark.
And now, on with the show.
Welcome to New Brunswick Traveler, that place where we talk about New Brunswick stuff. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about a wild fruit that we have that I think you will enjoy. So sit back, have a cup of coffee with me if you would like, and let's get started. Recently, I was having breakfast at a hotel restaurant in Mississauga, and I heard a person ask the waitress for blueberry jam. Well, his actual statement was, "You forgot the blueberry jam." And her reply was, "We don't have any." At that point, I wondered if the same response would occur at a hotel restaurant in New Brunswick where I live. Blueberries are a big deal in New Brunswick, particularly what is called the low bush or wild kind. Growing up in Indiana, I was only familiar with the high bush cultivated kind, the ones that produce those large, wonderful berries. I had encountered the low bush wild kind when my father would take me on a fishing trip to Ontario, but I didn't realize that those wild blueberries were something that could be grown and sold commercially. I just enjoyed finding them, along with the small wild strawberries. Quebec is the leader in blueberry production in Canada, followed by British Columbia, where 96% of the high bush cultivated berries is grown. New Brunswick ranks second in Canada in low bush blueberries. Much of the production is in the northeastern part of the province. The Acadian Peninsula is known for its picturesque landscapes and abundant blueberry fields. I'm grateful that about 20% of the production is in the southern part of the province, though, because that's where I live. Wild blueberries are native to Canada and have grown naturally here for centuries. They were an important food source for indigenous people and early European settlers who would harvest the berries from the wild. As European colonization expanded, wild blueberries became a familiar and inexpensive food that was easy to gather. Currently, there are over 300 wild blueberry producers in New Brunswick. For the most part, they're located in the coastal regions where the plant occurs naturally and where the moderating effect of the ocean reduces the risk of frost. In 2021, the wild blueberry industry here contributed $81 million to the provincial GDP. This is one of the few New Brunswick agricultural commodities whose primary market focus is global, with 80% of it being sold internationally. The farm gate value is about $20 million annually. The crop's considered an excellent way to diversify the coastal economies. Since the wild blueberries grow naturally, there isn't much cultivation that's needed. Just move the trees off the property and let the blueberries grow. Well, not really, but I wanted to make it sound easy. Canada's native peoples would burn wild blueberry fields periodically to renew the stand. Modern wild blueberry management consists of a 2-year cycle. In the fall of the second year, or in the spring of the first year, the fields are pruned. This can either be by burning or more than likely will be done with a mower. Pruning results in the outgrowth of new shoots with berries being produced in the second year. With good management practices, the provincial average has grown from 1,200 pounds an acre to 4,000 pounds or more. If you haven't tried a wild blueberry, you should. There's a richness to the wild blueberries that you just don't get with the cultivated kind. Thank you for taking the time to come and listen to this podcast today. It's produced, edited, and hosted by me, Mark Brewer. And it's commercial-free, except for the fact you could go to my website and buy me a cup of coffee if you care to. For now, have a good day.
There you go. I feel like that little jig there at the end. This is great, Mark. Great podcast. Again, if you're interested in traveling to New Brunswick in Canada, it's Eastern Canada, everybody. It's out there. It's beautiful. Gorgeous place to visit. Again, an awesome example of a local podcast, something we need more of in podcasting, something that you could do in your area of the world. I'd love to hear your local podcast. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear it. And reach out to Mark. Let him know you heard his podcast here on the show. If you love blueberries, and hey, 2 for 1, right? And I love listening to all the creative ways that people podcast and what they podcast about. Mark's a great example, and with that voice, come on, that voice, it's great. So go over, check out Mark's information, links in the show notes, link to his podcast, and like you said, go buy him a coffee. Come on, $5 coffee to say thanks to Mark. Sure, you can do that. And if you're heading to New Brunswick, look up Mark. I'm sure he'd love to meet you, take you around, show you around the beautiful province. And I'm excited, again, to put a spotlight on another great podcaster this month in November, where we do 30 episodes in a row in 30 days. Woohoo! And we're here for you to show you some great new podcasts to fall in love with from some of my friends in podcasting. Mark Brewer, New Brunswick Traveler, for you to check out. Thanks for listening. Keep podcasting, everybody. So I love being a podcaster. I love meeting these great people. And I love the fact that you pressed play on this episode and that you're still here. That tells me that there's something here for you. And if you're like, Dave, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this community, and I want to spend some time with you. There's a link in the show notes. It's just for you. You and I can get together and chat about your podcast, answer any questions you have. And the most important thing is we get to meet each other. So if you feel like you've been podcasting alone, you should never podcast alone. You should podcast in a group. We have a community just for you. And I, Dave, would love to be part of your community. HowToPodcast.ca is where you can find me, find our amazing community, and meet the people you've met here today on this episode. So, what are you waiting for? Stop podcasting by yourself. Reach out. I would love to talk to you. Happy National Podcast Post Month, and we'll talk soon. Thank you for being part of the community, and thank you for listening to this episode. HowToPodcast.ca. Take care.